I had to grudgingly admit to myself that I still loved her and probably always would. But does she really love me? I realized that I didn't even know what love really was. If she told me that she wanted to stay happily married, but her entertainment should only be reserved for paying clients and the occasional Spencer or Rudolph, then of course we would break up. Even if she were a world-class chef and conversationalist, I wouldn't call it a marriage. Or the other way around. Would I voluntarily leave and divorce her if I was guaranteed a free pass to have frequent fun with her? I don't think so. Yes, I'd like a free pass, call it a platinum membership to Ribald, but then I'd want to date a new woman for many other things of married life. I don't want to come home to an empty house every night. It's not even a house. God, what a deep thinker I can be. One thing began to clear through the haze. We can't go on like this. She's leading the life she's leading, and I'm pretending I don't understand anything. If we have any chance of surviving, we should just kick her out of her current job. But my ego won't allow me to live in society knowing I'm the cuckold of the freest woman in town. Forgive me for being so thin-skinned and vulnerable. So, she would have to agree to give up her job and lifestyle, but I'm sure she won't. I also doubt she'll agree to move far away from here and start over. Finally, I dozed off. Next chapter. I woke up to the smell of breakfast coming from the kitchen. I got up, did my morning chores, showered, shaved, got dressed, and went downstairs where Haida was finishing up her work. I grabbed a cup of coffee, kissed her good morning, and sat down at the table. She had prepared a very tasty Danvers-style omelet with bacon and toast for each of us, just the way I liked it. I had a hard time reconciling a sweet woman lovingly preparing breakfast with what I knew of her. I thanked her for the food and got down to business. As always, everything was delicious. When I finished, I put my plate in the sink, sat down at the table, and looked at her. She stopped eating and looked back. "Is everything okay, honey?" she asked. Showtime, I thought. It's either now or never. "We need to talk, Haida," I said in an even tone. She took a couple more bites from her food, then tossed the leftovers in the trash and put her plate away. She walked back to the table and picked up her purse. "I'm serious," I said, insisting on my point. "We need to talk about everything." "You're right," she said, "but not right now. I have things to do and I have to go. Meredith is expecting me this morning." She headed for the front door. "Damn it, woman," I said, becoming furious. "This is our marriage we're talking about. Is Meredith more important than our marriage?" She stopped and turned to look at me. "Listen, honey," she said. "I know you think it's important for us to talk, but right now I have things I must do. I'll be home late tonight, but if you're still awake, we'll talk then, okay? Right now, I have to go. Love you." With those words, she turned around and left before I could say anything back. "Yeah, me too," I said as the door closed. I sat there, stunned. Did she really not care about our marriage anymore? Apparently she didn't. Hell, we hadn't even been married for what, 2 years? 2.5 years since she started working at Paradise Bold. I went to work and tried to get through the day, but it wasn't easy. My receptionist checked on me several times to make sure I was alive and able to work. By lunchtime, I was fed up and decided to call it a day for a while. I felt like I needed to talk to someone about this mess, but who? And then it hit me. My sister Leanne was a lawyer. If anyone could help me sort this out, it was her. I called her office and was immediately connected. "Hey, little brother," Leanne said, picking up the phone. Leanne was older than me by about 3 years and was one of the wisest people I knew, after my father, of course. "Do you have a few minutes?" I asked. "I need to talk to someone." "So bad you need to talk to your big sister?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I take it this is a private and confidential matter?" She objected. "Unfortunately, yes," I said. "Good," she said after a few moments. "Come on over. I'll cancel my appointments this afternoon. We'll figure out everything that's going on." "Thank you, Leanne. I really appreciate it," I said. I walked out of the office, telling the receptionist that I would be out for the rest of the day and possibly the next. I headed towards Leanne's office and was immediately escorted inside. Leanne looked up from her desk as I walked in. She stood up, walked over, and gave me a sisterly hug and then escorted me to the couch that stood in her office. "No offense, Merle, but you look like hell," she said. "What's going on? Is it Heidi?" "Yes," I told her, "and it's driving me crazy." "Tell me everything," she said. Leanna listened while I told her my story. How I'd found out about Haida working at Paradise Bald. about the expensive coins and necklace she'd bought with the money she'd earned, about her affairs with Spencer and Rudy, everything. So you're telling me that Haida, your wife of 16 years, is flaming red and she's been hiding it from you all this time? Leanna asked. I nodded my head. Yes, I said quietly. Leanna stared at me for a few moments before she spoke. And you don't know what to do? She asked. She asked. Something like this, I replied. In the next instant, she slapped the back of my head. I stared at her, shocked. Damn it! She exclaimed. Your wife is a goddamn prostitute and you don't know what to do? Look, you're my little brother and I love you, so take this in the spirit in which it was intended. Were you born dumb, or did you go to school to become one? I looked at Leanna in surprise. She had always been very blunt, but she had never spoken to me like this before. Consider yourself awake, little brother, she said. Prostitution is illegal in this state. There's no telling what else she does. And you say she made a lot of money from it. Do you know if she reported her income to the IRS? I shook my head. I have no idea, I said. But I do know that she hasn't mentioned it once in the last 2 years. According to the manager at Paradise Bold, they've formalized her as a business contractor. Customer Perquisites, LLC, or something like that. He said they don't withhold any taxes, and he thinks she might have created a business tax so she wouldn't have to use her social security number. And you haven't talked to her about any of this? She asked. I tried to talk to her about it this morning, but she said she had things to do and left, I said. Okay, she said. Here's what I'll do for you. I don't practice family law, but I know a few attorneys in town who do. I'll call one of them right now and see if we can get you in for a consultation this afternoon. I'll go with you. Thanks, Leanne, I said. You're welcome, brother, she said, pulling out her phone. I sipped my coffee while she talked on the phone. After a couple minutes, she returned to the couch. You're in luck, she said. I've been talking to Wilbur Jennings. He's the best in the business, at least in this town. He's got an open spot for us, and he's bringing in a private investigator. If we leave now, we can get there just in time. It's within walking distance, so we won't even have to fight for parking. Let's go, she added, putting on her jacket. I followed her to the exit. About half an hour later, we found ourselves in the reception area of his business office. Leanne, Wilbur said, standing up and extending his hand. He looked to be in his mid-50s, well-built, with a slight gray on his temples. It's been a long time. Is this your brother? Yes, Wilbur, she replied. This is Merle. Wilbur and I shook hands, and he turned to the other man in the room. This is John Williams, a private investigator whose services I like to use, Wilbur said, introducing us to a short, stocky, plain-looking man in a somewhat rumpled suit. We all shook hands and sat down. So I understand you're having marital problems, Wilbur said. Tell me about it and we'll see what can be done. I told Wilbur everything, just as I had with Leanna. I wondered how many more times I would have to tell the story. Wilbur and John were taking notes as I spoke, and I saw them glance between them a few times. So your wife, Haida, is the fiery redhead who works at Paradise Bold? Wilbur asked. Yes, I said. Are you sure about that? He asked. Absolutely, I told him. I've even spoken to the club manager. Is that a problem? Wilbur leaned back in his chair and looked at John before he spoke. I'll be perfectly honest with you, son, he said. As much as I'd like to take your case and your money, I can't do it. There might be a conflict of interest. What do you mean? I asked. Are you representing her interests? No, I don't, he said. But I have used her services on several occasions. So you've hired her, Leanne said. I felt a queasy feeling in my stomach as he nodded his head. Yes, he said. I'm sorry, son. I'm not married and, well, you know. I'm sorry again. I didn't know she was married and I've never seen her wear a ring. Truth be told, Merle, she probably serves most of the divorce attorneys in the city and probably the county. Also a few judges, the mayor, as you already know, and a state senator or two. Rumor has it she's even been with the governor once or twice. I thought prostitution was illegal in this state, I said. It is, he told me. There was no direct exchange of money and she called her work stress counseling. I know it's a very fine line, but that's what it was. So what should I expect if I decide to divorce her? I asked. He shrugged. I can describe your situation in 2 words, he said. You're totally screwed. First, this is a no-fault state. You can't even mention adultery in a divorce. Even if you could, It wouldn't matter since you've already said you agreed to an open marriage from the beginning. Second, it's a community property state, meaning you have to share everything with her. Bank account, savings, house, retirement plans, everything. You have no children, so naturally, there will be no alimony. But you could be required to pay alimony. Alimony? I asked. Hell, she's already made more in 2.5 years than I've made in my entire life. Why should I have to pay alimony? Do you have anything showing how much she's made? Wilbur asked. A 1099 form? Anything? No, I said, nothing like that. Well, that's about it, he said. Besides, she can hire the best lawyer, run up all sorts of legal bills and get the court to pay them. She can do a lot of things to stall your development. Counseling, for example. You'll end up with no real evidence to present in court. So what am I supposed to do? I asked. Well, I suppose you could just leave, he said. Don't tell her where you are. Don't inform her of anything. Just go somewhere and let her cook for a while. Maybe she'll use some of her money to hire an investigator to track you down and file for divorce herself. I can't do that, I said. I have a job here, clients here, and I'm not the type to run. I have an idea, John said. We all turned to look at him. What is it? Leanne asked. Why don't I follow it for a bit? He asked. Me and my team will see what we can come up with. I've got a few friends left in Vice, and I know they've been interested in Rye Bolide for a while now. From what I've been told, they are very good at evading the law. They seem to have a knack for recognizing when there are undercover cops out there, but they don't know me or the people who work for me. Maybe we can help the Vice Squad shut the place down. How long will it take you to do that? Leanne asked. Maybe a couple of weeks, no more, John replied. That's if you're willing to pay for my services, he added, looking at me. I thought about it for a bit and made a decision. It was going to be expensive, but I had to get something. Sure, I said. Let's do it. I'd been saving up for another cruise, but with all this in mind, I decided, screw the cruise. Okay, he said, holding out a card to me. He opened his briefcase and handed me a form to fill out and sign. I filled it out and handed him a prepaid check. Just let me know who will represent your interests, and I'll be sure to forward a copy of my report. Look, Merle, I'm sorry I can't do more for you, Wilbur said, holding out his hand. You helped, I said, shaking his hand. Thank you for your time. Leanne and I got up to leave. Before she spoke, she looked at Wilbur. If I were you, Wilbur, I'd stay away from this place, she said. You and I both know what goes on there, and I'd hate for you to get in trouble with the state bar. He nodded his head. Understood, counselor, he said. We left and went back to her office. Merle, Leanna began when we returned. I know this has been hard on you, and it's only going to get harder from here. I know another lawyer we can talk to, but she's gone on vacation to Europe with her husband and won't be back until 2 weeks from now. Let's see what John can dig up, and when Lisa gets back, I'll give her a call. Okay, I said. In the meantime, you need to pull your head out of your ass, she said. Dig deeper, try to find tax forms, anything at all. Try to stay calm when you're around her. I know it won't be easy. You already know she's a brazen liar, so take everything she says with a grain of salt. And don't go after her lovers. I don't want to have to bail your sorry ass out of jail. Got it? Got it, I said. Good, she said. If it gets really bad, call us. Ron and I have a spare room you can stay in for a few days if you feel you need it. And remember, it'll be taken care of, one way or another. Thank you, Leanne, I said. I appreciate everything you've done for me. She smiled and hugged me. You're welcome, she said. I left her office and drove home, determined to find everything I could. I figured I had a few hours since, based on her recent schedule, it was unlikely I'd see Haida before midnight. I started looking deeper, even going up into the attic. I was somewhat surprised to see a fairly new box, the kind used in offices for papers, folders, and the like. I opened it and saw several folders. Several of them contained small envelopes with DVDs in them. I guessed what was on them, but I took a few to look through anyway. I also saw something else. Tax forms, 1099S, completed 1040s, various self-study forms, and so on. I looked, and sure enough, the 1099S were written out in the name of Client Privileges, LLC. According to these forms, she made almost $1.5 million in 1 year. The next year, she had already made almost $2 million. Wow, that's a lot of money, I thought. She must have worked hard to make that kind of money. But where did it all go? No way it all went to an old coin and a necklace. I looked deeper and found a recent statement from Fidelity Bank Limited in the Cayman Islands. According to it, she had just over $40 million in her account. Holy shit. I couldn't help but think that she was going to use that money for her getaway. But that wasn't all. In another folder was what looked like a contract. When she read it, it became clear what it was. Haida wasn't just a dancer and an expensive prostitute. She was a star with a contract to appear in 10 feature films. In for pennies. In for pounds, I thought. No wonder she was away from home all the time. I kept looking. In one folder were medical forms and bills from about 14 years ago. According to them, Haida had had a C-section. I realized what an abortion was. She had also had a tubal ligation to prevent subsequent pregnancies. Now I knew why we didn't have children. Apparently, she paid for everything in cash, so I never saw a bill or anything on the expense sheet. Had she really been abusing me even then? I remembered the playful bickering we had once exchanged after my first business trip out of town. I hope you didn't hit on all the guys at the club, I'd said, when she told me she'd gone to Bold Paradise while I was away. This was at the very beginning of our marriage. No, silly girl, just a few guys, and none of them were worth hitting on. None at all, she said in a teasing tone. I remembered that she made similar sarcastic remarks to me on subsequent trips. Eventually, I just stopped asking. Now, it seemed, the sordid truth had been revealed. And that wasn't all. I found calendars going back 14 years. There were entries for several dates, and I realized they were the days I left town on business. The entries showed dollar amounts, just like the ones on the calendars in the kitchen drawer. Some of the amounts were simply mind-boggling. There were other notations as well. A few dates were marked with an S, and I wondered if it referred to my so-called friend, Spencer. Some dates were marked with an R, and I suspected they were days she was with Rudy. Of course, I realized it could be anyone. Other dates had other markings on them, but there was no way I could relate them to the context. I saw dates labeled with an M, and figured those were the days we were doing this. I couldn't help but notice that some of the dates had multiple markings, like M and R. I almost threw up at the thought that maybe she was with me after having fun with another man. Behind the calendars, I found a small book, seemingly an accounting book. It looked like she'd started keeping it after 2019, which explained why I didn't see anything beyond that date on the calendar found in the kitchen. There were individual counseling entries and even larger fees entries that appeared about every 3 months. I didn't summarize it, but it seemed to me that she could have easily made a couple $1,000,000 in a year. Looking further in, I found envelopes stuffed with cash. In total, I counted about $6,000 and found folders with pictures of Haida. Some depicted her on stage, others showed her with one and often more than one man. I wondered why she had left them here and put others in a folder she found in the kitchen. Taking the application, sick notes, tax forms, and the contract with Paradise Bolide Productions, I went to my home office where I made copies on the printer. I called Leanna to let her know of my findings. Holy shit, she said. Tell you what, scan them and email them to me, okay? Consider it done, I said. It didn't take long, and when I was done, I put them back. Hoping Haida wouldn't notice her box was open, I went back to the computer and picked up one of the DVDs. Something told me I would regret watching what was on it, but I felt compelled to do so. My initial assumption turned out to be correct. The next few videos showed her in a motel room having fun with clients. I ejected that disc and inserted another. This one had the same thing on it. But the next few videos were different. They showed her with only one man. In one, I recognized the mayor of our town. In another, I recognized Spencer, my so-called friend. The last video on the disc was of Haida and her friend Meredith. God, that was so great, Meredith said. Yes, it was, Haida replied. I bet poor Merle would go crazy if he saw us now, Meredith said. Heidi laughed. He'd probably ask for a manual or something to understand what just happened, she said, causing her friend to laugh. And seriously, how much longer are you guys going to be doing this? Meredith asked. Haida shook her head. I don't know, she said. Probably as long as I can. Maybe a couple years. Paradise Bolide owns me for a while longer, at least until I finish all 10 movies. Merle doesn't know and hopefully never will. Do you think you can ever go back to having only one man? Meredith asked. I don't think so, replied my wife. Merle is a nice guy, but there's no way he could ever satisfy me on his own. Not anymore. Besides, we don't do it more than twice a week, and even less lately. Do you think he has something on the side? Meredith asked. No, not Merle, replied Haida. Once, a long time ago, but that was it. And seriously, said Meredith, you know he's going to find out about it somewhere along the way. It's not like you kept it a secret. I mean, you've been photographed in public with the mayor. What are you going to do? I don't know, Haida said. Maybe throw myself on his mercy. Even if he kicks me out or divorces me, I've got plenty of money. It'll be hard, but I can handle it. I don't think he'll miss me much. I haven't been home much lately. Damn right, I thought. As I watched, Meredith looked up at the camera. Turn the damn thing off, will you, Greg? She asked. Greg? That's Meredith's husband? The video ended after that statement. I knew I'd have to talk to Greg before it was over. I wondered how much he knew about their antics. I pulled out the disk and locked them all in my desk. I sat down at my computer, trying to make sense of everything I had seen and heard. I turned off the computer, grabbed a beer, and sat in front of the TV. I didn't pay attention to what was being shown. It was just background noise to me. It was hard for me to watch, and I realized I was actually crying. I went upstairs and washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't like what I saw. My face was still red and my eyes were swollen from crying, but I knew that divorce was the only way out. There was no way I could stay with a woman I couldn't satisfy. I went downstairs and got a sandwich. All this shit was making me hungry. I thought about going out, but my heart just didn't lie to it. I looked at the clock and saw that it was 10 o'clock at night. Time flies when you're having fun, I thought sarcastically. Haida was still nowhere to be seen, no messages or calls. True, she had said she would be home late, and I guessed why. I opened the Life 360 app on my phone, and it showed that her phone was in Ribald. Of course it is, I thought. I turned it off and went to sleep. I woke up to the garage door opening. I looked at the clock and saw that it was 2:30 in the morning. That's amazing. Today was officially my birthday. Happy birthday, for crying out loud. I wryly wondered how much she'd cooked today and closed my eyes. I heard her walking up the stairs to the bedroom. She walked over to the bed and I felt her touch my cheek. When she pulled away, I looked at her and saw that she looked sad for some reason. She went into the bathroom and closed the door. A few minutes later, she came out of there in a long nightgown and climbed onto the bed. She started to snuggle up to me, but I turned on my side and moved away from her. She kissed the top of my head and laid back down. I thought I heard her sobbing into her pillow, but I didn't care anymore. After a couple hours, I heard her quiet snoring and decided to get up. I threw on a robe and went downstairs as quietly as possible, grabbing her phone off the charger. I went into my office and looked through her message history like I had done before. I noticed that there were more messages between her and Spencer. So how's that wimpy little asshole doing? He asked her. She clearly didn't like the question. Stop calling him that, she said. Why? Isn't that what he is? Spencer wrote. 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 Spencer. He's not a wimp, she replied. Maybe not, but he is a wuss, Spencer said. And you made him that way. Stop reminding me of that, she said. So you've been having fun with him since we last spoke? Spencer asked. No, she replied. Good, he told her. Are you going on a cruise? A cruise? What cruise? I hadn't heard anything about it. Yes, I'm going, she wrote. That's going to be hard to explain to Merle. You won't have to explain it to him, he said. Just tell him you're going. From what I hear, you can make a lot of money. That's true, she said. You're going? Pretty expensive for my taste, but I might go, he said. From what I hear, they're already sold out, she said. I guess so, he said. Maybe I'll see you when you get back. Kay, I gotta get back to work. TTYL, she wrote, ending the correspondence. I had to find out about this cruise. Would she really go on a cruise without telling me? Or worse, would she just say she was going and expect me to just go along with it? This was getting out of control. I looked around some more and saw that she had gotten a message that looked like a money order. I opened it, And as far as I could tell, she had managed to make a little over $2,500 today. No doubt about it. I closed everything, put her phone on charge, and went back upstairs. The next morning, Haida made breakfast as before, and I dutifully ate what she had prepared. She sat and watched me while I ate. Apparently, she was somewhat disturbed by the lack of a hello or a good morning kiss. "Are you okay?" she asked. I stopped chewing to look at her. "Uh-huh," I mumbled, returning to my food. "Did you sleep well last night?" she asked. "You seem a little grumpy this morning." "I guess being alone has that effect on you," I said. "Are you going to be home tonight or not?" "Sorry, but Meredith and I are going to be busy again tonight," she said. "Of course," I said. "You know, there's something else we need to talk about. Do I need to make reservations in advance or something? Is there a reservation agent I should call?" "Of course not," she said. "Why do you think so?" "Oh, I don't know," I said sarcastically. "Just the fact that I hardly ever see you. It seems like you only come home to sleep, then change your clothes and leave again." "Look, I have things I need to do too," she said. "Whatever," I said, getting up from the table. "I've got to get to work. I'll see you when I see you." I grabbed my jacket and keys and headed out the door. I heard her say she loved me, but I didn't say anything back. She was done with me. After lunch, I got a call from Leanna. "Hey, little brother," she said. "How are things at home?" "Not great," I replied. "Why don't you come over tonight? Ron and I would like to celebrate your birthday," she said. "Sounds good," I said. "Will Haida be around?" she asked. "I don't know," I replied. "Well, it would be better if she wasn't," Leanne said. "I got a call from John. He said he had some information, so I invited him over too. Is that okay with you?" "Yeah, sure," I said. "What time should I be there?" "Come any time after work," she said. "I'll be out of here around 4:30 in the afternoon." "Then I'll see you around that time," I told her. We finished talking and I went about my business. I got out a little early and checked the 360 app to see where Haida was. Sure enough, she was at Rybald. Again. I shook my head and drove to Leanne's house. Leanne and Ron met me at the door. She gave me a hug, and Ron shook my hand. It was a little strange to think that I'd gotten more affection from my sister in the last 2 days than I'd gotten from my wife in what seemed like weeks. Ron handed me my beer and we went into the dining room. Leanna had already prepared everything for dinner. The doorbell rang just as she was putting the freshly made lasagna on the table. Ron opened the door and invited John inside. We all sat down at the table and enjoyed dinner, followed by ice cream and cake. Naturally, they wished me a happy birthday as I blew out the candles. Afterwards, Leanne handed me a birthday card. I found it quite funny and had a good laugh for the first time in a long time. John opened his briefcase and pulled out the report. He handed me a copy and spoke while I read the report. "I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, especially after such a wonderful lunch," he said. "That's okay," I said. "It was bound to come out sooner or later." "I gotta tell you, Merle," he said, "your wife is a real star in Paradise Bold. But there's something you need to know." "What's that?" I asked. "The club is sponsoring a 5-day cruise for adults in the Caribbean," he said. Of course, when word got out that Flaming Red was participating, tickets sold out almost immediately. Our source at the club confirmed to me today that she participated in the cruise some time ago. "Oh my God," Leanne said. "Happy birthday, damn it," I said. "So when is this cruise taking place?" "The hostesses, that's what Rye Bolid calls them, are supposed to leave for Miami on Friday," John said. "The boat leaves Saturday and should be back sometime Wednesday." He pulled out a poster and held it out to me. "Sun, Sea, and Fun," the poster read, written in garish red and yellow letters. "Join Flaming Red and friends for Rybald Windjammer's first Caribbean cruise." The poster showed a modern schooner on the water. Haida's smiling face flashed in the upper right corner. "That must be the ship they're coming on?" I asked. "Yes," said John. "It's supposed to be a cruise to the Bahamas. I don't think I need to explain what's going to happen on that cruise." "No, I get it," I said. "We also learned that the cruise will be used as a movie set for her next adult movie," John said. "Fiery Red in the Caribbean or something like that. As we found out, people who bought tickets will be able to see her live performance." I felt like I was going to throw up. "I'm sorry, Merle," he added. "It's okay, John," I said. "I guess I should have expected it." I looked at Leanna. "When will your friend be back from Europe?" "In 2 weeks," she replied. Is she really as good as you say she is? I asked. The very best, Leanna replied. She hates cheaters with a passion. Well, when she comes back, I want to file for divorce, I said. Do you think you'll have enough for your vice friends? I asked John. I think so, he replied. I nodded my head. Good, I said. Let me know how much I owe you. I think I have enough proof for my purposes. We talked some more, and then ended the meeting. I'm sorry, Leanne said before I left. She gave me a sisterly hug, and I shook Ron's hand. If there's anything I can help you with, let me know. Thanks, Leanne, I said before walking away. By the time I got home, I was exhausted. Of course, Haida wasn't home, so I got into bed and fell asleep almost immediately. I woke up to the smell of bacon, and after getting ready for work, I went downstairs. Where were you last night? Haida asked as I sat down at my desk. I tried calling home, but no one answered. I was at Leanne's, I said. She and Ron invited me to a birthday party last night. Oh my God, Haida said. Yesterday was your birthday? I completely forgot. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Yes, of course, as if her promises meant anything to me. Don't worry about it, I said. Just so you know, I'm spending this night with Meredith, she said. We're flying to Miami early tomorrow morning to do some shopping. Oh? I asked. When did this happen? We've been talking about it for days, she said. I know it's last minute and all, but she said there's a bunch of flea markets this weekend and we can get some really great deals. Does this shopping excursion include a 5-day Caribbean cruise? I asked. She looked at me, shocked. What are you talking about? What cruise? I don't know what you're talking about, she said. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the poster John had given me last night. I tossed it on the table. This cruise, I said. The one with flaming red. Yeah, I know who and what you are, I told her. Stop lying. She stared at the poster for a moment before she spoke. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She stuttered. Don't mess with my head, I said. You've been lying to me our whole marriage, haven't you, Red? I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Bullshit, I told her. Were you ever going to tell me about your abortion 14 years ago? I wondered why we never had kids, and now I know. I tossed the hospital papers on the table. You had your tubes tied then, too. Tell me the truth. Was it even my baby? I don't know, she said. While you were gone, I had fun with a bunch of guys. I don't know whose baby it was, and I didn't want to take any chances that it wasn't yours. I'm sorry, I should have told you. Yeah, you should have, I said. Were they paying you to entertain them? How can you ask me that? She asked indignantly. Oh, please, I said. I know about your career as a highly paid prostitute and actress. How long have you been getting paid? She trembled, and tears ran down her face. I started getting money for entertainment after my abortion, she said quietly. I shook my head. We had an open marriage, remember? We both agreed to it. Yes, we agreed to it, I said. But I think the word open implies a modicum of truth and respect for the other partner in the marriage. The truth is that you disrespected me, humiliated me, and lied to me for at least 14 years. Isn't that the truth? Hell, you had an affair with the mayor for crying out loud. I tossed a newspaper clipping on the table that showed her with Rudy. But you're not completely innocent, she said. No, not innocent, I replied. Early in our marriage, I had fun with one man, Cindy. But that was it. And you knew about everything because I told you. I've been completely faithful to you ever since. But you're so low. How many guys have you slept with in the last 14 years? A few thousand? And now you're a goddamn prostitute and an actress. You're damn lucky you didn't get caught by the cops. Were you going to tell me about this? Were you ever going to tell me about your offshore account in the Caymans or the expensive coins and necklaces you have stashed upstairs? She looked at me, shocked. You know about that? She asked. I nodded my head. Yes, I know, I said. I also know that you've been having fun with my so-called friend Spencer. You even did it once at a pig roast my company threw not too long ago, about 100 yards from me. And I know he wanted you to cut me off from him completely. Tell me, wife, how many times have you had fun with him this month? I don't know, she answered. Maybe 5 or 6 times. 5 or 6 times, I said. That's more times than you've been with me in the last month. Do you know what it's like to be considered the biggest cuckold around? Do you know how you humiliate me? I may have to leave town because of you, you damned lying bitch. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but they had no effect on me. You know, I've asked myself a million times if it's okay to cheat in an open marriage, I said quietly. You've shown me that the answer to that question is yes. I could probably handle a casual one-night stand, but I can't handle what you did. It's not just the lack of physical attention. It's the total disrespect you've shown me over the last 14 years. I'm sorry, she cried. If you want, I won't go on the cruise. I'll stay home. I'll leave Ryball behind. I'll be loyal to you from now on. I shook my head. No, I said, you can't. You can't. Loyalty is impossible for you right now. And you're already committed to this lifestyle of yours. Besides, our marriage is broken anyway. Have your latest affair as a married prostitute. After all, that's what you are. What did you say to Meredith? That there's no way I can satisfy you on my own anymore? That's not what I meant, she said through her tears. Yes, you did mean that. It doesn't matter anymore, I said. Just go away. I once loved you with all my heart, but I can't accept what you've become. And I don't want to stay with a man who constantly lies about everything. Go away, have an affair, make your own damn movie, do whatever you need to do. Just know that I'll file for divorce when you get back. But I don't want a divorce, she said. Frankly, my dear, I don't care what you want anymore, I said, repeating the famous line from the old movie Gone with the Wind. I'm done with you. Goodbye. Don't be here when I come back. I never want to see your face again. I gathered the papers from my desk, threw them back in my briefcase, and left for work. I wanted to ask her about what she kept in the kitchen, but decided it didn't matter, not anymore. I made my point and was done with her. Later that evening, I got a call from Greg, Meredith's husband. Merle, what's going on? He asked. Haida is very upset. She says you're going to divorce her. Is that true? Yes, it is, Greg, I said. But I thought you were okay with her being with other men, he said. Up to a point, yes, I said. But the more I dug into myself, the more I learned, the less I liked it. I don't want to stay with someone who lied to me and publicly humiliated me the way she did, and for as long as she did. Tell me this, Greg. Did you know about her little cruise? Yes, he said. I was actually hired as part of a movie crew. Meredith and I are traveling alone. We leave early in the morning. How many of her novels have you taped? I asked. A lot, he replied. I don't know the exact number. Meredith thought it would be easier for me to find out if I was involved in what they were doing. I see, I told him. Well, that's more than I got. Anyway, enjoy your little cruise. Bye. I ended the conversation and pulled a folder out of the kitchen. I looked through the pictures and pulled out a few that showed Haida and Spencer. I decided it was time to let Spencer's wife know about his affair with my soon-to-be ex-wife. I knew where he lived, so I went to his house. I saw him coming out of the house and waited a bit to make sure he wasn't just going to the store. I then drove up to his driveway, took the pictures I had, and knocked on the door. I was answered by a slightly older woman. It was Spence's wife, Christine. Merle, what a surprise, she said with a smile. Sorry, you missed Spence. He went to get a beer and play a game of pool with some friends. If you hurry, you can catch him at George's Tavern. That's all right, Christine, I said. I didn't feel like talking to him anyway. Do you have a few minutes? Sure, she said. Come on in. Would you like a cup of coffee? That would be nice, thanks, I said. She poured us each a cup of coffee and we sat down in the living room. How are you doing? She asked. Everything okay? No, not okay, I said. I held out the pictures to her. I hate to break the bad news, but I recently found out that Spencer and my wife were having an affair, and it's probably been going on for quite some time. Her face reflected various degrees of shock and embarrassment as she scrutinized the photos I'd given her. Oh my God, she exclaimed. Where did you get them from? She asked. I told her the whole story, everything. I even told her about the text messages between Spencer and Haida. I hugged her, and she burst into tears. Eventually, she pulled herself together and sat up straight. You know, Merle, I've suspected something for a long time, but I didn't have any proof, she said. Have you talked to Haida yet? Yes, I replied. And I'm going to file for divorce when she gets back from the cruise. I'd sue Spencer, but unfortunately, this state doesn't allow lawsuits for alienation of affection. Believe me, he's just one of the thousands she's dated over the past 14 years. I'm sorry to hear about that, Merle, she said. After all, he was your friend. Some friend, huh? I asked sarcastically. Yeah, she said. Well, you can imagine I'm going to give him a purge because of this. Thanks for warning me, Merle. Are you going to be all right? I'll be fine, I told her, more to reassure myself than her. I'd better get going. Thanks for the coffee. Call me if you need anything. You're welcome, she said. Rest assured, I'll be seeing a lawyer first thing in the morning. I gave her a hug and left. The next day passed mostly without incident. I wasn't surprised to find that Haida never got in touch with me. I received no calls, texts, or emails. Apparently, she didn't care enough that she didn't even bother to contact me. Oh well. When I left the office at the end of the day, things got a little more interesting. Spencer was leaning against my car, waiting for me to exit the building. You bastard, he growled as I approached the car. Thanks to you, Christina kicked me out of the house last night. I guess that's what you get for entertaining your friend's wife, I said. I'll kick your damn ass, he hissed, taking a swing at me. I managed to dodge his first punch, but he managed to land a second. Naturally, we fought in the parking lot, and I was pretty good at it. Luckily for me, a building security guard saw him swing at me and called the police. The next thing I knew, I saw 2 police cars in the parking lot and 4 officers separating us. After taking statements and reviewing surveillance video, they handcuffed Spence and took him to jail. I'm not done with you yet, asshole, he yelled as they pushed him into one of the cars. I drove home, stopping on the way to eat a burger and fries. I went to bed at my usual time, 9 p.m., and slept soundly all night. The next day, I took some trash bags and collected all of Haida's clothes, shoes, toiletries, and makeup that she had left behind. After filling 3 very large bags, I took them to the garage so she could pick them up the next time she was going to come over. I considered going out for a beer that evening, but decided to stay home and enjoy the peace and quiet. I figured I would have to get used to living alone anyway. The next day, I got out the old trusty lawnmower and cut the grass. That took up most of my Sunday. On Monday, coming home from work, I saw a story on the news that caught my attention. I immediately sat down at my desk and turned up the volume on the TV. It's just been reported, the newsreader said. Famous local exotic dancer and adult film actress Flaming Red is reported missing at sea, along with the other 100 passengers and 35 crew members of the cruise ship Mirabella, which the Coast Guard says capsized during a storm in the Caribbean late Sunday night or early Monday morning. Salvage efforts are ongoing, but no bodies have yet been recovered, the Coast Guard said in a statement. Flaming Red has been identified as the woman seen many times with Mayor Rudolph Burns. The mayor has repeatedly denied that he had an affair with the woman. The vessel was under contract with a well-known club north of the city. The club sponsored a 5-day cruise for adults, promising sun, sea, and fun with Flaming Red. The ship was due back in Miami on Wednesday, the announcer said. Damn, I said to myself. I changed the channel and saw the same report on another local channel. I got on the computer and found several articles that said roughly the same thing. It took a while before the news reached me. Of course, there was no proof that Haida was dead, but still, as angry as I was at her, I didn't want her to die. I picked up the phone and called Leanna. Have you seen the news? I asked when she answered. Yes, she said. I saw it. They still haven't found any bodies. Are you okay? I'm in mild shock right now, I told her. I never wanted this. I know, she told me. Let's give them some time to finish their search and see what the investigation shows. Maybe you should come and spend a couple days with me and Ron. No, I'll be fine, I told her. But thanks anyway. Okay, she said. Do you still want a divorce if she's found alive? Yes, I said. It's not a question. Good, she said. Just rest and try not to dwell on it, okay? Whatever you say, I said and ended the conversation. For the next few days, I was miserable. I followed the news, hoping to find some information about Hyde, but there was nothing at all. I tried searching for it on the 360 app, but found nothing. I even called Rybald and talked to Devin, the general manager. He remembered me from that Sunday when I stopped by to see him. I'm sorry, Merle, he said. I haven't heard anything. I promise if I hear anything, you'll be the first person I call. Thanks, I said and ended the call. A few days after the first text, Leanne drove me to Meredith and Greg's house so I could pick up Heidi's car. I couldn't help but notice the pile of papers on the porch, and it was obvious no one had been there in a while. I hadn't heard from me in almost 5 months. However, I didn't sit around and mope. I had plenty of time for reflection and introspection when I wasn't busy with housework. I was still a pretty good-looking guy who wasn't even 40 years old. I still had thick hair, and I was still in relatively good shape. I decided that I was still young enough to have a child, assuming, of course, I could find a woman who would actually want to have a child with me. With some embarrassment, I realized that my initial thoughts of infidelity were probably a result of Haida and I getting married so early. If I were to remarry, I would undoubtedly insist on exclusivity. I absolutely hated to go through what I had experienced with Haida all over again. One day, I came home and found a letter in my mailbox from one Alan Hastings, an Esquire lawyer. The letter asked me to contact his office as soon as possible about the estate of Haida White, aka Flaming Redhead. I called and made an appointment for the next morning. Alan stood up and greeted me with a thin smile as I was escorted into his office. After the receptionist left, he asked me to take a seat. "Please accept my condolences for your loss," he said. "About 4 months ago, we received word that the authorities had determined that everyone on the Mirabella had perished at sea. Since then, your wife's inheritance has been in the process of being processed." He handed me a check and asked me to sign it. I looked and saw that the check was for $1.5 million. "I'm sorry, Alan," I said. "I saw a statement not too long ago that said she had over $4 million in her account. What happened to the rest of it? Taxes?" He shrugged. "No, her account was well below the threshold for estate or inheritance taxes. I don't know what to tell you," he said. "Your wife's federal taxes have already been paid. That's what was in the account when the authorities made their ruling, minus her recent expenses, which weren't that great. She also indicated that she has a valuable coin and several necklaces that I believe are now worth a total of about $1 million. "Yeah, I know where they are," I said. "Good, because she passed them on to you like everything else in her inheritance," he said. "She also left this for you just before the cruise," he added, handing me an envelope with my name written in her handwriting. I haven't read it, so I have no idea what it says. I didn't feel like reading it in his presence, so I put it in my pocket. "I'll read it later," I said. We finished going over her will, and I signed everything he pointed out. When he finished, he closed the folder, handed me a copy, and looked at me. "Once again, I want to express my deepest condolences," he said. "Are you planning to hold a memorial service for her?" "No," I replied. He seemed a little shocked to hear that. "You don't understand. We didn't part on the best of terms." "I understand," he said. "Besides, I find it hard to believe she's really dead," I said. "I can understand that," he told me. "You were married for what, 16 years?" "Yes," I said. "Maybe you should talk to a counselor to help you deal with your grief," he said. "If you'd like, I can recommend someone for you." "I'll look into it," I said. "Thanks for the offer anyway." We said goodbye, and I left for work. I pulled out the envelope Alan had given me and read the letter written to Heidi. "My dear Merle," the letter began. Yes, that's right, I thought. I continued reading. "If you are reading this, then I'm probably dead. First of all, I want to tell you that I love you with all my heart and I am very sorry that things have turned out the way they have. I know you probably don't believe me, and I can understand that. After all, I've been lying to you for a very long time. As you've already guessed, I've been doing it with other men the entire time we've been married. I decided to take advantage of the fact that we had agreed to an open marriage and figured it was just fun and wouldn't affect our relationship in any way. I should have known better, but I loved what I was doing. Then I got pregnant. It happened after a few men. I couldn't risk the baby not being yours. I knew you would never raise another man's child, so I exercised my legal right and had an abortion. I had it done while you were on one of your trips and paid cash so you would never find out. I also had my tubes tied so I wouldn't get pregnant again. After that, someone suggested I make a lot of money for fun. I thought, what the hell? And I started taking money. Yes, I knew it was illegal and I had to be very careful. More than once I was close to getting caught. Anyway, you know how good I am at collecting a lot of money, and that's exactly what I did. At first I hid the money in the attic, but as time went on there was too much of it and I couldn't take it to the bank right away. They wouldn't have realized right away that something was wrong. Besides, I knew they'd have to make all sorts of reports if I put too much money into the account at one time. So I bought necklaces and coins. I figured they would, eventually, be worth a lot more than I paid for them. I kept doing what I'd always done, leaving the house only when you weren't home and hiding cash in the attic. When you stopped traveling for work, I had to come up with another plan. I couldn't explain leaving the house 3 or 4 times a week so you wouldn't get suspicious. Of course, I kept looking for cheap things to sell to make extra money. And that's when I came up with the idea of working part-time at Paradise Bald. Remember when I started volunteering at the homeless shelter? At first, I actually went there, but after a while, it became my cover, along with evening shopping trips with Meredith. By then, I was gone 3 nights a week. You can imagine what I was actually doing. When I got a job at Rye Bald, General Manager Devon suggested I work as a private contractor. He helped with the paperwork and even had someone help me set up an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I still had a bunch of cash in the attic, and I used most of it to open the account. From there, things went on from there. And no, I didn't have fun with 2 state senators. It was actually 3 state senators, and also with the governor and a member of Congress. I hated to see this in her letter as I didn't find anything funny, but I kept reading. Then Devin suggested that I do movies and pose for pictures. He said it would help increase my income and give me more exposure in the industry, no pun intended. So I said yes. I was to star in 10 movies over 4 years, and I was promised to be paid a fee every 3 months. By this point, I had already starred in 5, and the money was amazing. I became more bold and open about what I was doing. You can partly blame Spence for that. He decided it would be a lot of fun to cuckold you in public. And to be honest, by then I thought it would be a lot of fun too. I confess I've lost a lot of respect for you over the past few months, and for that I'm truly sorry. You've worked hard to take care of us, and I've only entertained you for my own selfish pleasure and enrichment. Do I regret it? Yes. Oddly enough, I don't regret it, but I do regret what I ended up doing to you. I especially regret that I never got to give you a child. You would have been a great father. So why am I writing this? I don't know. I just have this weird feeling that something might happen, and I want you to know the reason I acted the way I did. All I can do at this point is hope that one day you'll find it in your heart to forgive me. I'm not sure I could do that if I were you, but I know you're a much better man than I am. Please believe me when I say I love you, she wrote, and ended the letter with, Your loving wife, Haida. I folded the letter back up, put it in an envelope, and threw it in my desk drawer. It was very hard for me to believe that she really loved me. But could I forgive her? And why should I asked myself. She was dead and gone. Wasn't she? I went about my business, and a couple of days later a visitor, one Alice Hastings, appeared in my office. My secretary knocked on the door to get my attention and said, Let her in, please, I said. Alice, a rather tall, slender blonde in a business suit, entered my office. I shook her hand and invited her to sit down. What can I do for you today, Mrs. Hastings? I said, noticing her rings. I'm with First Fidelity Life Insurance Services, she said, and I'm here to deliver a payout to you. What payout? I asked. I don't have a policy on you. No, but your wife, Haida White, does, she said. It was a policy issued through her place of employment. I see, I said. I didn't realize she had a policy through her place of employment. Yes, and she listed you as the beneficiary, Alice said, opening her briefcase. She pulled out an envelope and held it out to me. I opened it and found a check for $2 million. Is this real? I asked. Yes, it's real, she replied. The policy was for $1 million and contained a double indemnity clause. Since her death was ruled an accident, an act of God to be exact, you'll get $2 million. She held out the papers for me to sign, which I did. Is there anything else? I asked. No, she replied. I just wanted to hand you a payment slip, Mr. White. Please accept our condolences for your loss. Thank you, I said, for the condolences and the check. She smiled as she stood up, and we shook hands again. When she left, I sat back down. I looked at the check and shook my head. If that's not all, I thought to myself, $3.5 million plus a coin and some necklaces totaling about $1 million. I couldn't help but wonder what might happen next. Life went on. It couldn't be called fun, but at least the drama was over as Haida and Spence disappeared from my life. Leanna, however, decided to play matchmaker and spent the next couple years setting me up on dates. Most of the women she introduced me to were fun and interesting, and I had a good time dating them. I even had relationships with a few of them. But there was no spark with any of them. That was until she introduced me to Robin Carson. Robin was a 36-year-old divorced woman who had caught her husband in bed with another woman. Strange, I thought. A few years ago, it wouldn't have mattered much to me. Now, however, I looked at things differently and felt guilty in front of her. I told her my story and we discussed the issue of fidelity. So I take it you don't like the idea of an open marriage? I asked. Oh, hell no, she replied. If that's what you want, you can stay single. I considered her words carefully and realized she was right. You know, I'm inclined to agree, I said. We seemed to get along pretty well and dated for another 6 months before I popped the question. She squealed with delight as she hugged me. A little over a year later, she gave birth to a bouncing baby boy they named Robert. Yes, I thought, holding my newborn son in my arms, this is exactly how it should be. The epilogue takes place 26 years later. A woman was sitting at a table on the balcony looking out to sea. She had just read an article on her tablet about the man she once called her husband. According to the article, he had just left his position as CEO of an international fast loan company. After becoming a billionaire, he and his wife, with whom he had lived for over 20 years, were about to embark on an around-the-world cruise. According to the article, their son, Robert, graduated with honors from the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and is now serving as an officer in the U.S. Marine Corps. A tear rolled down her face at the thought of it. This should have been her son, and she should have been the one to go on this cruise. But she had foolishly given it all up for fun, fame, and money. Her ex-husband, the man she'd cheated on for most of their 16-year marriage, looked happier than she could ever remember. Worse, he still retained his attractiveness. She watched the video that accompanied the article and couldn't help but notice the way he and his wife looked at each other. They were clearly a couple deeply in love with each other, as she and Merle had once been. The reporter asked him about the secret to his success. The truth, the devotion and love of a wonderful woman, he replied with a smile, glancing at the brunette standing next to him. She sobbed, touching the screen. Why was I so stupid? She asked herself. It had been 26 years this month, since the Mirabella had capsized, sending everyone to certain death. Well, not everyone. One survived. Haida White, aka Fire Red, is every man's dream, a married prostitute. She remembered that horrible night as if it were only yesterday. She remembered barely managing to grab her purse before the ship flipped on its side. She had somehow managed to climb onto one of the few remaining life rafts. She saw her friend Meredith, submerged underwater with her eyes and mouth open in panic. She reached out to save her friend, but couldn't get to her in time. For days, she huddled under a tarp on the raft, trying in vain to protect herself from the elements. Several times, she heard the sound of a helicopter in the distance, but the rescuers never saw her. She tried to put the sounds of screaming passengers out of her mind, but to no avail. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Meredith watching her from the depths of the water. Floundering helplessly in the sea, she realized she would never be rescued. Perhaps, she thought, it was for the best. After all, she would have to explain what she had been doing in the deckhouse that night. What had so distracted the helmsman that he had not had time to react to the danger? Somewhere out there at sea, she realized that all those deaths were her fault, and she would have to answer for it. There were few supplies on the raft, a few cans of food, and a small flask of fresh water. She managed to hold on until a fishing boat came up and pulled her out. The captain of the fishing boat said they were headed for Georgetown on Grand Cayman Island. She knew that was where her bank was located. Perfect, she thought. They fed, clothed, and took care of her until they reached their destination. She thanked the captain with a handful of $100 bills she pulled out of her wallet and asked for directions to the bank. Fortunately, her passport was still in her purse and she was able to access her account and some money for the trip. A little over 2 months and $75,000 later, Haida White, aka Fire Red, was gone, and Anita Garrity, an American immigrant from Boston, took her place. Of course, all her papers and documents were fake, but they were good enough to pass the scrutiny of local officials. She didn't even look like the woman who had left her husband a little over 2 months ago. With a check for just over $2 million in hand, she had traveled to Costa Rica, where she had bought a modest but cozy home on the Caribbean coast. Since then, she had lived there in relative obscurity, making occasional contact with her ex-husband. She hoped he would try to find her and tell her he forgave her, but that never happened. She saw that the government had written off the incident on the Mirabella as a storm and declared that all the men had died at sea, which meant that she was, at least from the government's point of view, dead. Nevertheless, she knew that the truth would eventually come out, as it always did. So she continued to hide. But it wasn't easy. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her friend Meredith begging for help, sinking deeper and deeper into the water. 8 months after the government's announcement, she learned that Paradise Bold had been searched. The club was closed permanently, and several arrests had been made. Of course, by then, Flaming Red had been replaced by a younger, skirted, blonde-haired version of who she used to be. In time, the world forgot about Red's existence. She also read about Spencer's stay in the county jail. Upon his release, he was destroyed by a very vindictive wife who brought him out in the divorce. She never heard from him again after that. Eventually, Rudy was recalled and left town in disgrace. The governor and state senators she was allied with were re-elected. She continued to live her new life and tried to remain as reclusive as possible. She met many locals and became fluent in Spanish. She occasionally socialized with other immigrants, but never met or developed close relationships with any of them for fear that any of them might recognize her. Her dreams continued and became more vivid over time. Eventually, Meredith began calling out to her in her dreams, begging her to join them. More than once, she was tempted to end her self-exile by taking an overdose of sleeping pills, but somehow resisted that temptation. She had recently been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer for which there was no cure. All the doctors said she had no more than 6 months to live. Anita, or rather Haida, did what she always did and planned her demise. She wasn't going to rot in a hospice somewhere. She would die the same way she had lived, on her own terms. So, turning off the tablet, she looked at the papers lying in front of her. She checked again to make sure everything was in order and signed at the bottom. She wrote a note to Lupe, a 40-year-old local woman who had been her only real friend for the past 15 years. She knew that, in the next day or so, Lupe would come to check on her, as she always did. "Lupe," she began. "I'm leaving to join friends I haven't seen in years," she added. In her best Spanish, "Because of my diagnosis, I won't be coming back. Thank you for your kindness and friendship over the years. It has meant more to me than you can imagine. The house and everything in it is yours. I have also given you the balance of my bank account. Please give my regards to your wonderful family. Love, Anna." She put the letter and forms where she knew Lupe would see them when she arrived. Wrinkling her nose in pain, she headed toward the dock where a small wooden motorboat was tied up. She had already checked to make sure everything she needed was on board. Gasoline? Check. Drill? Check. Diving supplies? Check. Tequila? And sleeping pills? Check. Her plan was simple and straightforward. When she reached her destination, she would put on the diving weights, drill holes in the boat so it would fill with water and sink, then take a handful of sleeping pills and some tequila to numb the pain. After that, she would submerge into the water, and no one ever knew where she went. Unhooking the boat from the dock, she climbed in and started it up. Looking back at the house, she said her goodbyes and headed northeast. "I'm coming, Meredith," she said quietly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'll be with you soon." The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next videos.